So a big thing that Canada especially has something to do with research is with ethics. So whenever you have a clinical trial you want to start at a site, you have to have an ethics application done up for it. This is a lot of fun. So you basically have to compress a protocol, which a protocol is usually about 100 pages or so of information on a clinical trial. And you have to compress it and tell a board, this is what we're going to be doing, and this is why it's safe, and this is what we want to do. And it usually takes about 8 months to get through. So you go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, confirming things and changing forms, which is always fun. And then we also create a budget with the sponsor, if it's a for-profit. Just a quick interlude. I've gotten 2 hours of sleep in the first night and 4 hours on the second night, so I'm kind of running off steam, so please bear with me. So yeah, we actually have to go back and forth with the sponsor to develop a budget that works for us, because there's actually usually about an overhead that the site will charge as well. So, and we need to make money to obviously fund our research personnel like me, so I get paid. We also develop a contract which is between the sponsor and us, so similar to a budget, just in written form about all the things we agree to. There's 4 different types of clinical trials. I don't operate whatsoever in phase 1. Phase 1 is like when the drug is first tried on humans. It can be quite a lot of risk associated with it. So most of the work that I do is in phase 2 and phase 3. So I'm not sure if you can read that. I'm not wearing my glasses. I can't read it from here. But obviously, if you notice there's some amounts of people for the phases, obviously you're not going to be getting 1,000 people that have acromegaly into one trial. There's no way. So what they have to do is they have to do it international, and even with international, you'll probably get maybe 100 or so. But that's what you have to do. It's a rare disease, right? There's only so many people who have it. So I'm currently involved in a study. I can't release any details or anything, but with acromegaly, there's a lot that's happening. It's going to be pretty exciting for the next 5 years or so. There's going to be a lot of new stuff coming out. So good stuff there, and I'm happy to be involved with it. As I described, I work with Dr. Orr and Dr. Michelle Johnson. So Dr. Orr is our principal investigator, so he heads the study. Well, at least he likes to think so. I do it, actually, but no. And then our sub-investigator is Dr. Johnson, so they will pool their patients together so that we can have a decent size of sample size for our site. And then there's me, the clinical research coordinator, so I'll deal with anything as far as administration goes or seeing the patient. I actually am responsible for some of the procedures that are done, like electrocardiograms and whatnot. And I deal with all the communication with the sponsors and working on informed consent forms, which is quite the pleasure. I was joking. We have the pharmacies. At St. Paul's, we have a wonderful team there. I'm very happy to be with them. And we have lab personnel, so people who draw the blood. We actually don't have the lab analyze it. Usually we'll have it sent out somewhere. Usually the sponsor will request that it's all done at the same lab, which kind of makes sense because they have the same procedures for determining values. We also have nuclear medicine at St. Paul's, but recently I got called in because I was starting up a new trial, and something interesting happened on the phone. I called the MRI department. I said, hey, I've got a new study. We have a budget that's in the works. Would you guys be interested? We have just about 3 or 4 patients or something like that. We're not doing research. Click. Okay. So I called back somebody else that actually had time to speak with me, talk to me. So we've actually lost the ability to do any more trials at St. Paul's because there's so many going on right now that the MRI department is completely overloaded. So we have to go private, so that's been interesting. But we'll make do. So the recruitment process. The doctors that we have at St. Paul's, they have an electronic medical record system. I think that's quite common nowadays. Some people stick with paper, if you wish. So we will pull information from the EMR and the doctors will decide which patients to contact, and then just curiosity, who's ever been contacted to be part of a clinical trial or has ever had a friend or family involved in a clinical trial? Okay. So a small amount, but still. It's so what happens from there is that they'll have an appointment set up. Sometimes it'll just happen on the same day where they actually come into clinic, and we'll speak with them and say, hey, we got this opportunity for you. Would you like to join up? And so then we'll just follow up with them as the recruitment process goes on. Usually we'll let them know if it's happening. The Informed Consent Form, the acronym is ICF. It's a very important document. It's not much fun to write, but it's very, very important. Essentially, it's like, if you download a program, it says, here's your terms and conditions. You know how you don't read that and you just click accept? Well, this is about your body, so you do want to read that. It's not like your phone that you don't care about so much. So this is about your body. So definitely, if you ever get a consent form, please read it. We put a lot of time into writing them. So they're important to both us as well as the patient. So it essentially lays out what we can do and what our schedule is like, and sometimes if you'll be offered any compensation for your visits. What follows the consent process? Well, usually screening. So screening, we'll start with this then. Okay. So eligibility criteria does fall into screening. And the screening process is essentially seeing if you as a patient qualify for being part of the study. So just because you got offered being into the study doesn't mean you qualify. So there's going to be some conditions that you actually have to meet. So for instance, with an acromegaly-related trial, what will happen is you have to perhaps meet a certain threshold for your IGF-1 value. So for instance, if we had an eligibility criteria for 1.0 on two consecutive visits, and this patient came in for this, it's 1.0 times the upper limit of normal, so we'll accept that, and we'd have to have it retested. Unfortunately, what happens is we have patients who will go into screening and they will fail the screening, and then Dr. will be confused, and he'll take his own lab report, and then they would actually qualify, so we're not sure what happens there. I guess it depends on the assays that the labs actually conduct their analysis. So examples of acromegaly eligibility criteria, a lot of it's physically based, so the enlargement of the jaw per se, and also proper diagnosis and, oh man, I need coffee. I'd love some actually. Yeah, please, thank you. Just sugar and cream, please. Thank you so much. Okay, I'll survive. How does the screening process operate? Well, usually it's a very condensed schedule, so you have a lot of things that need to be done. There's lots of procedures, especially with a disease like acromegaly, where you have to have an MRI done. You have countless, as you've seen with Laurie's presentation, blood work. Like, we always give them a nice goodie bag that contains all the tubes, and then off you go. I'm sorry. Especially the growth hormone test every half an hour. I can't believe the 2-day thing. I thought 2 hours was bad. But, man. So let's just move on. So we have a couple of common questions that I'll just quickly cover. Does my decision to decline to take part in a clinical trial affect my standard of care? Absolutely not. No way. There's no way you should feel obligated. It's just an opportunity for you. The doctor will not be upset if you say no. That's just important to know. How much of my time is required in site visits? Well, it depends on the schedule. So some clinical trials will actually request that you come in every 2 weeks. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. I wonder if it's just I'm nervous or if it's just a lack of sleep. I don't know. Shaky hands. Oh, yeah. Well, help me up here, but not here. So it depends. We have, in some of our trials, some of the visits will take up to like 3.5 hours. So in those cases, you should be compensated. I mean, it's usually on a weekday that we operate, so you're should be at work, so you're losing work time if you are working. So in most cases, you will be compensated. Well, this was covered in detail by Laurie's presentation. It's very similar, so we'll have like a basic blood work drawn up, so hematology profile, chemistry, we'll check your thyroid, we'll check IGF-1 growth hormone, we'll do an MRI. In most cases, we'll do an abdominal ultrasound as well. So yeah, you'll be coming to the hospital a lot, but you'll be doing it all for science. So this is an interesting one. If you don't know, placebo is used in a lot of trials to determine if the medication is actually working, in a sense, because there's what's called the placebo effect, wherein a patient will, just because they think they're taking something, they can actually feel as if it's working. So this is to rule that out and to also test if the drug works itself. So placebo medication looks exactly like the medication you'll be prescribed, but it's not. It just looks identical and probably tries to taste the same or something. So why use it? Well, I went over that. What happens to you when you're on placebo? So it's really interesting and also difficult because with patients who have acromegaly, if you stop taking your somatulene, or it's going to start feeling pretty crummy, as you can probably imagine. So with studies in acromegaly, what we have is we have a withdrawal system. So for the study I'm working on, if you show any signs and symptoms that are severe, we can withdraw you and put you immediately back on your injectable medication. Oh man, I thought this was going to go on longer than this, but I'll have some stuff to yammer on about. So your participation is invaluable to us. It's really important that we do find patients for studies. Without the patients, we can't release anything new. We need to have a certain amount of verified data and a certain amount of population to ever get anything through a health authority. So if I just revert back to, this is to do with Health Canada, just if we go back to this slide here. So for any medication that's released in Canada, it has to be proven to be safe and effective. So the first phase of the trial will do a small population, and they'll say, okay, well, it seems to be working well. We haven't issued any severe adverse events, so that would be a hospitalization or anything like that, or any severe pain associated with taking the drug. So once that goes through and then we find that it's actually working for the patients, we move on to phase 2, where a larger population is taken into place, and it is more of a standardized procedure. So you're able to transfer the knowledge you've gained in phase 1, and you are able to kind of narrow down what you really need to see and what procedures need to be done. Phase 3 is basically the same thing, just with a larger population, and usually phase 3 will end up being a placebo-controlled study, depending on what is being researched. And phase 4 is just essentially an even larger population if it's required by the health authority. So it's all depending on the results of each study as to whether or not it needs to be extended or not into another phase. So it takes a while to get new medications approved in Canada. It's different in other countries. Notably, it's quite interesting that a new study that we're starting on, I went to a conference for in Budapest. That was a nice city. Very, very hot, though. I spent most of my time sweating in a bed. So what I found there was that everybody there at the conference, except for the Canadians, had their ethics approved. That's how we operate. I'm not going to say anything negative about it, but that's just how it is. So you just have to be aware that it takes more time for us to get new drugs in. And you'll notice that with a lot of different, like diabetic medication or devices as well. It's unfortunate, but you just have to live with it. And it's important that we still do the research no matter how long it takes to get it through. I'm confident that within the next 5 or 7 years or so, there's going to be a lot more options for people with acromegaly as far as their treatment. It's very exciting to be on the forefront. It's always interested me to be in rare disease research, especially with my condition. And if you're curious about my condition, I'm at the conclusion roughly, but it kind of ties into what I'm talking about here. If you notice me picking up the cup, I actually can't use my ring finger and pinky finger. I've lost almost all control of it. So probably when I'm old, it's going to be like this or something, but maybe by then they'll have robotic replacements and I can get a robot arm or something. Let's hope for that. Interesting, though, that my sister actually has a rare disease, but it's a mental one. She has early onset childhood schizophrenia and was diagnosed when she was, I think, 8 years old. So that's really, really, really rare. So when I was young, I was always just like, well, why is that? Like, we need to find why. So it was always a question of why when I was younger. So when I discovered acromegaly and I was offered this position, I was just blown away about the amount of knowledge that's out there. And I'm very pleased to be a part of it. As far as the conference here, I've learned a lot just sitting here, more than I've learned reading books and online, in some cases, from some of the presenters yesterday and today. I am ending this a bit early because actually this presentation was intended to have a question period at the end of it, but I guess we'll have time in the question panel. So I will take any questions there, and I will finish my coffee, and hopefully I can answer them for you. So thank you very much.